Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to Future of Utilities webinar, Tackling Rising Customer Expectations Without Inflating Costs, hosted in association with UiPath. Great to have you with us today. Now, whether you work in energy or water, customer expectations and regulatory pressures are rising fast. Also, margins and allowed returns can also be very tight. Until now, it's been difficult to make radical improvements to customer experience all at once because of the knock-on effect on the bottom line. But how can technology offer a way out? Well, many are starting to take advantage of efficiency savings across the value chain, reducing waste, pushing resources towards business activities that add value to customers. In turn, that can offer crucial differentiation in the market. So today, we'll be looking at how you can exploit the latest innovations to offer genuine excellence to customers without inflating costs. We have a very busy hour ahead. Luckily, we have a fantastic panel of experts from across the utilities industry to help us to tackle those issues. Let's meet them. First of all, let's start with Craig. Craig, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Craig Holliday. I'm Head of Water Supply for Northumbrian Water. We cover water and wastewater services across the northeast of England and Essex and Suffolk in the south.
Great to have you with us today. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from you today. Next up is Aurelio. Aurelio, hello. Where are you, first of all? How are you? And who are you?
Hi, Lindley. I'm Aurelio Oliveira. I am in Santiago, Chile. Although I am a Brazilian, I am a CFO of Enel Americas, a utility company that we are in Latin America, basically. And that's a great honor to be here with you.
It's great to have you with us. Lovely to have you with us from Chile. Right, now next up we have thirdly, Mark. Mark, good to see you there. Just tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Mark Askew. I work for EDF in the UK. So we're a low carbon electricity and gas supply company, supplying businesses and residential customers across the UK. Specifically for me, I work in the technology side of the world and bridge the gap between business intent and our solutions that we deliver.
Perfect, and we'll hear much more about that today. And last but not least, we have Hugh. Hugh, tell us who you are and what you do.
Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. My name's Hugh Williams. I'm from UiPath, world leading RPA vendor and platform. My role is to help customers to automate specifically in front office, contact center, customer experience environments, a part of our practice, our customer experience practice. It's a real pleasure to be here today and be in really great company. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you all with us. Great to see everyone from around the world with us today. So we do have a lot of big issues to cover during the next hour, and you may well have your own burning questions or comments for us. So we want to hear from you direct while we're live. It's very easy to send your question to us. Just use the question box on the right-hand side of this page. You are the fifth person on our panel today, so please do get in touch, and we'll answer your questions towards the end of the session, but of course I will remind you to do that anytime you like. Send us a question. Well, let's get started. Let's look at the customer experience first of all. Let's start by taking a little step back, thinking about the status quo. Aurelio, where for you do the greatest inefficiencies lie in your business?
Well, Lindley, in our case, first of all, logistic issues, right? We are a very big region with 28 million end users. So in South America, we have a big lack of infrastructure. So this is the first one. Second one, the level of digitization. We still have lots of movements, people moving around, and this lack of automation that we are investing a lot right now is the biggest issue that we are working now. And last but not least, social inequality is very important, this issue, because after the pandemic, the region, I think it was the most affected region after the pandemic. So work on these three things in a sustainable way is very important for us to provide value for the clients.
Yeah, and we'll hear more about that. I guess it's a diverse customer base and also very spread out.
Exactly, because we are in Brazil. For example, Brazil is a continent by itself, another culture, other language, and then we move to the other, let's say, other part of the Cordillera with the Spanish language. So these cultural issues is very important. Again, clients are different. Clients, we need to be close to them, and these issues, of course, provides, or we need to be more close to the clients, and understand how they needs, how they needs the energy, and of course provide them the best quality and competitive price again at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to Northumbria. Craig, what about you? What are the big inefficiencies? What are the issues that you have to solve day by day?
Yeah, I mean, obviously working in a regulated monopoly means that our prices are set on a 5-yearly basis through the price control period. And we have to be very mindful of our customers and providing value to our customers at all times. So in terms of the way that we operate, we have very clear performance commitments and the expectations, that the levels of service that we give to our customers. And in order to really drive the efficiency into our organisation, we really try and have everyone lined up behind those different measures, and trying to remove the inefficiencies out of the process by minimising handoffs, making sure that we're all working to the same common goal, and that really allows us to work out where the non-value-added parts of the chain are, and allow us to be much more efficient in what we do. Every step along the way is about how we can provide the best possible service to our customers, and really making sure that they're at the forefront of what our business is there to achieve.
Great. So from a diverse population, from spread out locations to the way you work as a business, in your case, Craig, and working together. Now to another name we'll know very well, EDF. Mark, what about you? Where are these inefficiencies for you, and what areas do you think we could look at?
So I think particularly coming from a system context, as we look to history and the way our systems have been designed in the past, and our processes on the back of that, we've very much designed our processes around a meter. So we've all got a gas meter or electricity meter in our home, and we use that as our core starting point for our processes. Yeah. Over the last few years, we've been really focusing more on the customer and seeing our entry point, Craig was saying about the measures around the customer rather than the meter, but the industry itself works around meters and assets. And so that drives through a mismatch between what our customers are talking to us about and the processes that we need to run behind the scenes on that.
Yeah. So three quite diverse cases there, and diverse issues and sets of inefficiencies. Do they chime with you, Hugh? You're working with a lot of utilities partners. Are they common? Are there other areas that we could look at in terms of inefficiencies?
Very much so. And what's the real common denominator here is the fragmented technology and the fragmented data. Yeah. So there is an abundance of data in all organizations and no shortage of it. In fact, probably too much to grapple with. But the challenge is, how do organizations make sense of this? How do they, most importantly, drive a much more engaging customer interaction? And I really like the fact that Mark pointed out how typically the industry is seeing the asset really as the primary, not the customer. When the reality of it is that customer has their own needs, wants. So there are three real areas we're seeing across the board. And the first one is obviously the fragmentation of data. The second is around lack of personalization, so the inability to be able to understand the specific customer problem, the challenge, and to act upon that end to end. And the third is around managing change in a rapid and agile way. So traditionally, we've seen big or large-scale technology programs taking years to implement, and in some cases, by the time that implementation is complete, the design is out of date. So the ability for organizations to embrace more agile technology and to be able to constantly iterate and improve that.
Yeah, and perhaps what we'll do as we go today, Hugh, we'll get into some ways to start to bring these things together and find solutions and strategies to get ourselves moving forward. Well, Mark, look, there's a lot of improvement that's needed, lots of areas to look at. How do we start to move on? And are there particular innovations or technologies, solutions that you like the look of that can help us to work more efficiently?
Well, it's interesting, Hugh, talking about data. And I think that it wasn't so long ago that before smart meters started to roll out, that we were seeing 4 meter readings for each household per year. We're now seeing over 35,000 reads per household per year. So that explosion of data really is causing us to think about how we store data and how we use data, and leading to cloud computing. So the rise of cloud computing comes alongside the rise in the amount of data points for us as an industry. And he was talking about personalization, and that amount of data really does allow us to be able to understand our customer, to understand their usage. We understand so much more about the comparison between one house and another. Not one read every 6 months, but one read every 30 minutes is a tremendous amount of difference.
So Aurelia, not just because you have such a diverse population the sense of population that you're serving, but also the locations. How important is it to you to look at data, to look at connected information, to then start to offer a bit of personalization? How important is that for you at the moment?
Lindley, data, I totally agree with Mark and Craig. This is a data business, right? And moving to a data business. So historically, in the energy industry, we send any energy to the client, and we didn't care. But now it's very important. I know it's a cliche, but customer centricity is more than ever a key issue for us. And this data, in order to provide services embedded with the commodity, with the energy, is key for us. And to us, that's the future of the industry. It's like a platform business, and a data business, to add value, to provide more comfort for the clients, provide quality of life, to provide comfort for the clients. So it is key.
A quick follow-up to that, actually, Aurelio, which is in certain parts of your populations, I'm sure people they're not connected up in the same way that you'd like them to be. So the data may not be coming through. Now, that's something that not only happens in South America, but happens all over Europe and all over the world. Any ideas as to how to get people to kind of buy into this, and then for you to get hold of that data?
Well, today, the only way here is to improve the smart meters, right? Of course, we are testing other platforms, including using mobile phones, right? Creating a kind of platforms, and in order for the clients to give comfort, to pay the bills, and to have efficiency in their homes and so on. But it's not developed, and it's not the best way that we are seeing a really important deployment in smart meters. And the key issue, as Craig was explaining, that our business is a monopoly. So we need to implement regulatory rules in order to be profitable, this implementation. I mean, who pays the meters? The clients, or the distribution, or what will be the way? So we are still discussing, depending on the countries, Brazil, Colombia, well, Chile. There's not an agreement, and not a fixed way to remunerate this. Brazil, I think it's more advanced on this, but still a lot space to come to conclude.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's good to get an insight where you are, because so many challenges exist there. Craig, getting the data in, analyzing that, working out what people want, what your customers want is one thing, but also you've got people in the business as well who need to be able to handle the data, work with you, understand the goals. You mentioned this earlier on. How do you connect the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good points there from Mark and Aurelio. But really the culture comes from within your organisation. So we'll all have fantastic teams that work for us, that really understand the core issues that are going on when it comes to efficiency and inefficiency throughout our business, and what works for our customer. And the key is creating that environment where people feel as though that they can innovate, they can bounce ideas off each other, and create something that's really going to work, and make that kind of game-changing solution for the future. So Northumbrian Water, we've really worked hard on that over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's culminated in our Innovation Festival, which is held every year. So we started off by working with our people internally. And then that's branched out, and we're really looking at what's going on in perhaps the energy sector, oil and gas, retail sectors, all sorts of different areas, and bring people together from a real disparate environment to bounce ideas off each other and work out how we can make these step change improvements for our customers and for the environment. It's really important to generate that for ourselves and not just focus on the one technology that's here now.
Yeah, absolutely. Hugh, help us out. Good examples there, really interesting examples as well of the challenges and how people are looking at the solutions. But, how do you start to connect everything up, get the data in, start to analyze it well, and start to really make headway, because it's such a big issue. And we haven't even talked about measurement out there on the network. But how do you get the data in? How do you start to work with it?
I couldn't agree more with Craig, and certainly bottom up, and certainly getting a culture of sharing ideas. And most of the ideas, in fact, all of the ideas we see are with those who operate, who run, who interact with customers. And what we traditionally have seen is technology that has been built and implemented to an organization. What we're now seeing, of course, is technology that can work with the end user, with various parts of the business. So because of that, obviously having a culture that instills the bottom-up ability to capture and to quickly execute and to feed back to those individuals on the contribution that they had to driving innovation and improvement is absolutely key.
Yeah.
The second point, very quickly, is on agility to be able to adapt and improve seasonal trends, changes in customer expectation, and of course the financial impacts that tend to impact businesses. So to be able to have very agile technologies that can respond in line with that expectation.
Yeah. And in terms of when we talk about automation, obviously that can take out some of that legwork and start to handle, you start to handle that data and get an accurate picture, and that can then be used by your people within the business. But how do you start to reduce the manual effort? Because in utilities, clearly, formerly a very engineering, very very hands-on business where you would push out the energy and it would be very much infrastructure. So how do you start to reduce that manual side that perhaps can be automated?
So first and foremost is to discover effectively and to understand those specific components and to build those components that are relative to that scenario. What we don't want to have is to build large-scale technologies where people have to, again, have another level of having to navigate and be frustrated with the data. It needs to be very, very user-friendly and effective and fit for purpose, for their purpose. And the second to that is the multiple personas that exist across the business and the linkages between them. So in customer service, for example, being able to interact upstream to downstream, from the contact center into field, and to receive feedback in real time. So building for purpose and constantly iterating and improving.
Yeah. Mark, particularly now, and this is in the UK, I'm sure it's around the world, there are lots of challenges in the industry and there are lots of challenges for customers. So empathy, compassion, very important when you're dealing with customers. How can you start to sort of design and build systems and ways of working that will devote more time to empathy, to the human touch? What are your feelings on that, Mark?
Well, there's a big part in there, which is the word time. And so I think that first of all, we need to find ways to create time, find ways for our agents and advisors to be able to spend that time with the customer. And so we look at our business processes and really look at those from an outside-in perspective, so from the customer's perspective, and asking ourselves, is this a process that's valued by the customer? And is this a process that's valued by ourselves? And amazingly, we do things in our business that's not valued by us and not valued by our customer. So we've just stopped those. We call those waste, and we've just taken that waste out.
Yeah.
Then we look at the next level through of creating time, and we've looked at automation. So we've been through a process of identifying our transactions, and those transactions that the customers want to do, we need to operate those, but they're not really a value conversation. So I've updated my telephone number. Clearly, we want to know your telephone number, we want to know your email address, but there's no real value in that. So we introduce bots, and those bots will accept that information and it will update our systems without anyone having to be involved with that.
Right.
As we've gone through that, we've started to put AI behind it. So we're using AI to understand what our customers are saying to us. So rather than us pressing buttons in an IVR, we're asking our customers to speak to us. We understand their utterances and we automate that.
Yeah.
And that's what's really creating the time. So by creating the time, we give our team members the right skills, the investment in people that Craig was talking about, to be able to have those high quality conversations. And then we measure the conversations based on the feelings of the customer at the end of it, rather than how long it took or how long they waited. What really matters is how the customer feels about the conversation and did they get the right outcome.
I'm going to circle back around to this in a second. So Aurelio's been, you can't see it, but I could see Aurelio nodding all the way through that. So I'll come back to you in a second to get your thoughts, and also from Craig, from a people perspective, because of the work that you've been doing at Northumbrian. So that'd be really good. We'll just get an idea of how that works for you as well. But Hugh, mention of AI automation there, obviously. What are the good applications? Where do you suggest for companies such as our wonderful panel here to look at AI and automation, and how that can start to take some of that hard work out, the legwork out, and then allow empathy to come into the relationship?
So let's start with the basics of automation, and that is to remove those mundane, low-value tasks that simply get in the way of good customer experience or meaningful work. So first and foremost, to be able to remove those tasks and activities for robots to take care of those during their working day or around their working day. And that obviously builds a new opportunity for that individual, because by emulating the human, that's precisely what we're doing, obviously, by removing those mundane tasks. We obviously want to increase the intelligence of that automated process, and that's where we start to introduce AI. What we're seeing is AI is coming in many shapes and forms, but if you look at how that could influence a working day, it could be having more depth and understanding of a customer. For example, understanding if they're likely to churn, or understanding if their sentiment has dropped below a certain point. And what that does is creates an opportunity in context for that individual to support that customer with their specific inquiry. And that really lends itself to new and more innovative ways of managing a customer, and of course, managing a customer proactively. So where we start with basics, it moves to the quite complex very quickly.
And just one point on vulnerable customers who are perhaps have the most complex needs or the most emotional needs. Yes. Well, that's where it really counts as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So coupled again with personalization is understanding that customer, understanding that in context to their needs. So being able to deploy the right services at the right time, integrate those services across the entire end-to-end customer journey. And of course, to be able to not only react to that specific vulnerable customer need, but maybe support for that customer with their carers or other broader support infrastructure. So it's about understanding the needs and wants, and then being able to trigger all of the relevant support in real time for that specific customer.
Brilliant. We'll keep on driving efficiency in just a moment, but I'm really intrigued, Aurelio. On our screen here, I could see that you were nodding as we talked about the empathetic approach and those things. Why were you nodding? What was it about what Mark was telling us that interested you?
Lily, regarding I totally agree with you with this understanding the needs of the customer, right? Because sometimes we think that we are all customers also, but we need to listen and to be close to them and have this approach in order to provide them solution. I totally agree with Craig with the innovation. And also embedded with sustainability. That's why in NL we call it innovability. This is very important, and work in a very agile way. I mean, not silos, working together. I am the financial guy working. I need to work together with the commercial guys and the operational guys. We work together, and it's a process. again, we are not totally prepared to this. We are learning a lot. But when I see the half of the glass, we advanced a lot, especially with the pandemic. I think, especially in our region, we have a big improvement to this. If I may say, it's a good thing for this problematic period. Is that we learned a lot and to work together, work from anywhere. This is very important to get to the future and to get a better improvement for the customers.
Yeah, we'll drive back into efficiency in a second, but firstly, I'll just go to Craig and then I'll go to Mark very briefly. Craig, look, people. You're not only connecting all of this data, but you can start to see the importance of sharing that vision, which is a customer-focused vision. It's not just policy, it's not just strategy, it's on the ground, helping people to work very clearly with customers, and the technology joining that up. Are you seeing the results of that from your work so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the customer is absolutely at the heart of what we do in my organisation, and I think you summed it up really, really well in terms of, you know, the more that you can take away the non-value add activity in the system, the more you free up that expert to look after the customer in the best possible way. And we really, really want to empower our people to help solve the problem that the customer has, because that's better for all involved, right? It's better for the customer because they get the outcome that they want. But equally, internally, it's better for us as an organisation because you have one person owning the story, the journey of the customer. There's less handoffs internally between different teams that all might have had a different part of the process in the past. The one owner sees it through to completion, make sure that the right person takes the action, and you create a virtuous circle where the customer gets the absolute best outcome in the shortest possible time, which leads to a more efficient organisation in the round.
And so your people know that. Your people know that they own that relationship. Is that right?
That's exactly what we're aiming towards. Our people being empowered to own that customer journey and really make sure that the customer is at the heart of what we're doing.
Right, you are. Yeah, and Mark, yeah, you put your hand up there. What did you want to say about that?
Just, I think that when we think about vulnerable customers, and we spoke about the pandemic, and Craig was speaking to us before the call about the storms that we had in the UK over the weekend, that the agility to be able to spot when a customer becomes vulnerable, and that might be a day, that might be whilst they're ill with COVID, 2 weeks later they're not vulnerable. So having the data and to be able to personalize, as he said, personalize for this time, doesn't mean that they're always vulnerable. So having that agility to be able to churn through and then personalize based on you today and not you last year or when you've clicked on a form. So that agility really plays into the customer service that Craig was talking through as well.
And it's very efficient to be customer centric. Actually, if you stop that duplication and try to reduce the amount of complaining and dealing with the complaints more efficiently, hey, efficiency is really good. Let's keep moving. Let's go straight back into efficiency. Aurelio, as a CFO, I guess there can be sometimes a bit of a conflict between this empathetic approach. I mean, you clearly believe in it, and so does everybody else on our panel. But empathy can be quite expensive, quite labor intensive. And that can conflict with the bottom line. So how do you strike the balance between the two? How do you, as the CFO, the finance guy, as you said, start to drive forward the need for empathy?
Yeah, Lindley, it's a very, very good question. We need to convert ourselves, right? And to be more, of course, we need to be more sustainable vision. I mean, we are generally pay more attention to the short term and forget about the sustainability of the company. So this is the big change, right? We need to look for externalities of the communities, the society, and really apply the shareholder, the stakeholders capitalism. I mean, to provide value to not only to the shareholders but also to the clients, but mainly to the clients, to the communities. So this is something that, and this is financially we can explain this, because if you are acting this way, you reduce your the famous WACC, the cost of your capital. So this is the way that you need to think. For example, in the pandemic, the first things CFOs, the first idea was, no, I need to receive money from the clients first, and then I will pay the suppliers. So, but this is not sustainable because your suppliers will bail out. So, I mean, this is not the way to analyze the issue. And I think there is a tomorrow, and you need to work together with the areas. And you are not financial guys. You are not you need to work together with the business, side by side with the business in a sustainable way.
So Craig, a longer term view, a wider view, how does that feed into whole life cost? How does whole life cost feed into this new approach that can be more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. Whole life cost incredibly important. Traditionally, the water industry, utilities industry is very infrastructure driven, and infrastructure costs a lot of money, right? So, the traditional approach would be to build a water treatment works, tens of millions of pounds perhaps to put that sort of infrastructure in place. And we've got to be mindful of both the short-term cost and the long-term cost to our customers. Someone's got to pay ultimately. We're all feeling cost pressure at the moment at home, let alone in the workplace. Energy costs are going one way. Commodity prices are going up. So we really need to start thinking in a more system-based approach in the way that we do things. So again, traditionally there might be a problem with a pollutant contaminant in the water system that you need to engineer out. We might have spent money building a treatment works to do that in the past. Now we need to be very much thinking about how we engage with local landowners, with the Environment Agency, with other stakeholders that have got an input into that system to say, okay, if we can manage out that pollutant at source, working with the local landowners, working with the root of the problem, we might be able to keep that whole life cost down to our customer and generate a much more sustainable solution for the long term. Better for us, better for the customer, better for the environment, and it's really it's a win-win in those circumstances. The worst possible world is having to spend lots of money putting infrastructure in place that then has to be passed on to the customer for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how long it's written down for.
I can't think who it was, Hugh, that talked about churn. It may even have been you earlier on, but I suppose what's the phrase? Does it cost 4 times as much to acquire a new customer? I forget what the marketing phrase is, but what do you think the link is with acquisition, retention of customers, and how, again, with an efficiency mind on us at the moment, how much better is it to reduce acquisition and retention costs?
I think the headline there is, can we deliver personalization at a fraction of the cost? And I think for the first time, we can probably do that. And the reason we can probably do that is because the data is there to understand the customer more. And Craig's point on the linkages between maybe infrastructure and that customer and resisting that cost being passed on. But if we look at back to sort of churn and the cost of customer experience, what we're seeing here is when a customer has now an expectation to interact with the brand, that is built on their modern experiences with new brands. And we've all been consumers of those brands through the pandemic, where those brands and e-tailers now probably understand us more than we understand ourselves, and certainly the recommendations to products and services do support that. But when you look at traditional industries like utilities and energy, there's still this lack of understanding the customer to that intricate level, and of course that has an impact to how you service that customer. So you're still, in many cases, the industry still is fragmenting the customer journey. There's still passing between different departments into the field and back to the customer. So there's a real opportunity to use that data that sits today to both rationalize those experiences, to personalize them. So yes, it is now possible to deliver personalization at a fraction of the cost.
I'll throw to Mark in a second. We'll talk about data quality in just a second, but to you, wherever you are in the world, at home, in the office, if you haven't sent a question to us already, please do. We'd love to hear from you, and also you will drive the last 10 minutes or so of our conversation today. We've already got through so much, but if there's anything in there that you think we haven't covered or you think needs another question, let's have it, and we really want to hear from you. The tougher the question, the better. in some ways. But do let us know what you think. Look, so on data quality, Mark, of course, it can be a big stumbling block. Your internal data can be as well, but external data. How do you work with third parties to bring in the right sort of data or analyze the data in the right way? I mean, how are you doing it? How are you working with those externals?
Well, I think what's really interesting at the moment, so when we look at the UK electricity marketplace, Hugh was talking about churn, we've gone from 50% of the market suppliers have now exited. So in the last 3 months, we've lost half of the supply base in the UK. So we're in a place where there is a huge amount of customer data that's now flowing around the system. And when we look at that data, we kind of have to hold the core belief that each of us as holders of data don't set out to have bad data. You know, we all want to have great data. We all want to be able to provide that. And so from an EDF perspective, we've been working with the teams and introducing what we've called a data literacy program. So we've been training our people in data. We've been helping them to understand some of the terminology, some of the tools. And that's really driven up the quality because we've asked our people to take ownership of the data that as they touch data, if it's wrong, to correct it on behalf of the customer and the organization. That is backed up with a data catalog. So we've got, Hugh was talking about the disconnects across our system, but the catalog allows us to join up across the enterprise all of the data, and we've got a view of each application, each field, each quality element of the data across the estate. And then we put automated data quality checks in there. And so as we bring data across from another supplier, telephone numbers is a great example where telephone numbers, they're always a zero. So, you know, you need to put a number, you need to enter a field, you need to enter something to pass the check. I'll put a zero in there. That's what I do. But we're able to spot that that's wrong as we import the data via the industry processes. We're able to match the customer out to external sources and auto-populate it. So we're kind of driving the quality of the data as we ingest it and then improve it as we go through our processes.
Just very, we'll stay on this for just a few seconds, but Craig, I wonder whether that's something that's that you're doing, or perhaps, you know, again, it's sort of having the army of people within your business also able to freshen up your data at all times. Does that make sense to you, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, on an asset management level, we capture an awful lot of data from out in the field on our assets and the interactions that we make with them, and making sure that data is correct. Will have huge benefits into the future because, you know, a lot of the data processes we're talking about here rely on good quality data, and if you don't have the good quality data to drive those decisions, then you know it's going to be difficult to take things forward. So I guess, you know, we're probably I'd say in a hybrid place at the moment where we're collecting that data and using our people as well as building the new systems and approaches to go with it, with the aim of having that good quality data set robust in the future.
Yeah. Aurelia, what about compliance? That does add an extra layer, and it can be clearly very, very costly to react to new regulation. What do you feel about the issue of compliance, Aurelia?
I believe to us is incorporated in the way we do business, right? You cannot think that it is an extra cost. Of course, we need to be transparent, to use the correct and high standard of governance. That's how we work at NL. We need to do things in the very transparent and ethical way. So compliance, especially taking attention, we deal a lot with data of the clients. So we need to take care about cyber attacks, for example. So we need to protect this information. I know every colleague that we have here in the panel, we suffered a lot of attacks. This is normal. So this is something that we need to be compliant in a high standard. And to us, of course, it increased the cost. Yes, it increased the cost, but that's the way to do business. If you don't want to work like this, so leave the industry, because we need to incorporate this, and no doubt about it.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, you mentioned cyber attacks. Of course, for any utility company, you have to absolutely have good defenses and have good data, and therefore be able to handle those things as they happen. So that's very, very true. I'll throw this to Hugh in a second as well. Just interested to know about the data handling element, just in very brief. But Mark, we did talk about internal data as well. You're dealing with personal data a lot, and I wonder how best to deal with that very sensitive personal data, and not necessarily in terms of cyber, but just, yes, handling it, using it in the right way, perhaps assuming a certain amount about that customer so you can have an efficient relationship with them. What do you think, Mark?
Well, it's interesting. So as an industry, we often talk about the compliance as the bad guys. And regulatory change and the burden of regulatory change, and how we need to factor that into the cost of operation. But GDPR, I think, actually put us into a really good space for handling data, and PCI as well. So there's kind of two great pieces of regulatory framework that helps us to understand what our obligations are, helps us to understand how we store that data, how long we keep it for, what we can use it for, and also open up a conversation with the customer about how that they want us to use the data. And so we use those kind of bedrocks of GDPR and PCI as our umbrella, and then introduce that into our security framework. As we've moved more to the cloud, we use AWS, but it's the same with any of the cloud providers. That security guardrails that we put in place protects us from the outside, and then those kind of key Data Protection Act type policies allow us to implement our processes inside.
Yeah. So Hugh, just a quick thought on this, because we talked about data handling, we talked about information security, cyber, those things. These are all very logical steps. Any other thoughts from you, or any particular things that you think we can focus on to make sure that it may not be the sexiest conversation about data security, but it is one of the most essential?
It is. And what's quite interesting here is the balance between understanding enough about your customer to not over engineer some of the data that you have, and obviously sit in line with some of the existing regulatory requirements, particularly around GDPR, but also be able to execute against that data that you have effectively, so it has meaning and value for you having that information in the first place. So there's the first consideration is when is data too much data, and when you're actually able to use that. And the second one is, of course, using technologies to protect the customer and the brand against any breach in that information. So we're able to see, and often now see, automation playing a role in compliance, certainly with being able to track the way that data is extracted and presented to different parties, informing, for example, a customer service engineer if there is missing information or incorrect information, and of course, from not just from a compliance perspective, but from a quality assurance perspective, to ensure that all of the process has been followed effectively and that there are no missing components within that. So absolutely, automation plays a role in this space. And of course, both from a customer personalization perspective, right the way through to regulatory requirements.
And it also allows you to solve customer issues pretty quickly if you have that really keen eye on the data and how far you need to go and what data you need to cite back and receive from that customer. All good stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to proactively manage a customer is obviously the utopia, but it's there. And that we many of our customers in this sector who are now able to predict failures of assets, failures of components, customer behavior, and to proactively interact with those customers, saving that organization millions in the process, but most importantly, reassuring that customer that that brand understands them and is able to manage them in a very intricate and sophisticated way.
Yeah. We're about 4 or 5 minutes away from your questions, wherever you are in the world. So keep them coming while we're live, and we'll get to them. We have some already. We'll try and answer those in a few minutes' time. But let's carry on for a minute. We are balancing across this session today, the need for great customer experience, but also trying to balance that with the cost and the efficiency elements. Craig, what do you think in terms of the cost of recruiting, the cost of retaining people? What big elements there do we have to think of? Because you're clearly doing a lot of work, as everybody here is, on making sure people are happier, working more efficiently, also getting more out of the job. So what about recruitment retention?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So particularly in my company, Northumbrian Water, we've got a good retention going on. We've got lots of people that have worked in our organisation for a long time, and in my experience, if you give people the opportunity to grow and to develop their careers, and you empower them to make a difference in their area or beyond, then they're likely to stay. It's more efficient, more effective to grow your talent pool, to bring in people into the organisation and watch them develop and flourish and adapt to the varying conditions as time goes on, rather than have to bring in people from expensive kind of roles externally, and then you build them and kind of bring them into the culture of the organisation, which helps you to be able to. I've heard the word agility a lot of times. Helps to kind of bring that agility into things as people feel invested in what they're doing. And I think that's a really important thing to have, because ultimately the people in your organisation are the only ones that are going to be able to affect the outcome for the customer. And if they feel empowered, engaged with what you're doing, much more likely to have a successful outcome. Or in the event of something going wrong, you have the goodwill, you have the expertise to put that right.
Yeah. I wonder whether, Aurelio, I'm sure this isn't true where you are, but is there still tension between the finance team and the customer team? Who wants to be in charge? Who wants to pay the bills? All that stuff. Is the day dawning when we can all start working together and with the same shared values?
Yeah, Lindley. The reality, yes, we are.
Yes,
we fight a lot. I mean, in the good, in a good way. But if you see in the past, it used to be worse. I can ask Mark or Craig if they agree with me. But it was worse, and we are improving a lot our relationship. I think we are again fighting, but we are aiming and trying to reach the same objectives, and we all understand this that this relationship. I mean, the aim of all of this is the clients, right? Sometimes we started some intellectual discussions, who is right, who is wrong, but at the end of the day, we need to be and to work to the same direction and get together, work as a team to get the best, to deliver the best value to these clients, to this customer, to all the clients, to get the best value for the company. I think we improved a lot this relationship. I don't know if Mark and Craig agree with me, but from my side, yes.
Mark first, very briefly, Mark, and then Craig, you put your hand up too. Yeah, Mark.
Well, I think that we really have moved to a service industry. So we moved from a supply industry to a service industry, and our colleagues in finance and HR and all of our support teams understand that. We all know we're here to service the customers, and so that's the mission.
And Craig, you put your hand up there very vociferously.
Yeah, I agree with the principle there, and I think that there will always be a kind of healthy tension between finance, customer, and operations, right? Because we're all trying to do the right things in our area, and there will always be an element of risk management in all of this. So what's good always for finance is not necessarily directly good for the customer, and in that area. And actually, if we're too far in any one direction, we've talked a lot about efficiency and inefficiency today. If we're too far in any one of those areas and that tension doesn't exist, we're probably not being efficient. So there has to be that kind of balance in there as well.
Hugh, I don't want to leave you out of this argument, but we'll get there. We'll get there in our own way, and I'll ask you a different question that perhaps doesn't involve a fight. Okay, so it's been fascinating so far, hasn't it? And we really hope that you've enjoyed hearing the great insights from our panel so far. We're not done yet because it's now time to hear from you directly. Thanks for sending in your questions. Let's go to them. We'll try to answer them. We may not be able to answer every single one of them, but let's give it a go. Now, look, Mark, I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but I'm just going to ask you a quick question. There is one to EDF. I haven't read these questions, and neither has Mark or anybody else in the panel. If it's not one for you, Mark, throw it back to me. Right. Question here, 2 likes. On EDF. As EDF have just announced that it will move to Kraken for your customer operations, how will this help you to tackle rising customer expectations without inflating costs? The name of the webinar. Even more as it sounds that you are already well on your way to addressing these challenges. So is that your area of expertise, Mark? Is it something you can answer?
It is. So what we know about the organisations that have adopted the Kraken operating model and the Kraken system is that it's hugely efficient. So we spoke about designing around the customer. We've spoken about cloud. We've spoken about that straight-through processing. And because the Kraken platform is less than 5 years old, the systems that we come from 15, 20 years old, it's springboarded all of that learning into its core design. And so we know, and we've measured the efficiency of Kraken versus our own. But what really matters for us is that efficiency, but also we want the EDF tone of voice, we want the EDF service ethic to sit around the outside of that. So in its core business processes, we reduce our costs because it's an efficient straight-through processes. In our customer service and our ways of working, we continue to exploit the best practice of EDF. So it's the balance between the two.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to throw this one to Hugh. Hugh, again, if we can't answer it, we'll give it a wide berth. But it's a good question. It's a classic question, and I think it's worth always answering this one. In terms of customer interactions, how do you decide which interactions should be automated and which should be human? What's your thought process? For example, questions or dimensions to determine this. How do you start to get your parameters right, or how do you approach working out what your business does so well and doesn't do so well that you can start to get that human tech balance right? What do you think?
Great question. Thank you for whoever posted that, because it's a very, very interesting point.
Yeah.
And really, what we tend to do is put ourselves absolutely in the shoes of the customer. So what we're seeing is that the majority of customers, or there is a move to majority of customers really not wanting to speak to a human for a very simple task or activity. So the simple rule of thumb is if it's low value, it's transaction. There are some challenges, of course, technical ones where, for example, updating a meter reading or something that simple may require updating multiple systems of platforms in the back end. Automation can, of course, solve that technical issue. But the point is when does a customer want to interact with the brand, and when do they simply want to interact with the digital channel? And, of course, to give them that path of least resistance. So the first rule of thumb is to take those simple transactions that are prepared and ready to be automatable, for want of a better word. But the second one is then, when is that tipping point? First and foremost, when you want to speak to a customer, it might be the only opportunity you have to speak to that customer for that year or even longer. So there may be a desire to put that customer through to an agent, for example, to support them with their specific task or activity. And the third one is when there's an element of complexity or regulatory requirement. So there is also the opportunity to partially automate the process. So to start with the transaction element and hand to a human in the loop, in this case, a customer service representative, to solve the complex piece, or of course, to route parts of that to different parts of the organization. So putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and really taking that journey as they would, and look for that path of least resistance every time.
Very good. It's interesting, isn't it? Because yes, when you pass to another agent, customers, whether it's banking, whether it's your digital bank, or whether it's your utility company, And I've never been passed back to, I've never been offered the option from a human saying, right, is that it for us? Okay, can I pass you back to the chatbot? The interaction hasn't quite got there yet, has it? So there is still a way to go in terms of how you design your systems so that perhaps as a customer I might want to just then walk away and deal with the efficient way and come back to it. Hugh, there is still some clever thinking to be done.
Absolutely, but it's becoming intuitive in our day-to-day life when we go shopping to the supermarket and self-serve, right the way through to how we transact online. Yeah. The ability to self-serve and have a human in the loop as part of the interaction is now becoming the norm.
Yeah. Okay, we've got 6 minutes. Oh, sorry, please. Yeah.
If you wanted to interact with our agents and our bots, we do that. So we do pass off. So we will have a conversation and we will pass people off back to a bot. So come and join EDF Energy.
Yes, I have been in previous homes, so that's one to look at. The experience alone is worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more questions. We've got 5 minutes left, so let's. I like this one. It's really good. I don't want to jump this onto anybody, but it's a really good question. Any good examples of failure? Because we've got to be more open and honest about this aspect too. Failure, you can also talk about success as well, but we've heard a lot of success. Aurelio, any thoughts into failure? Can be, look, we haven't got there yet. We're not there yet, and we know we've got a mountain to climb, literally in your case. So what about failure, Aurelio?
It's a very good point. In order to innovate, you need to be open to failures, right? To improve, test, and learn with your failures. So we have lots of failures, and we learned a lot with this process. So I mean, we need to be open to this possibility, because if you don't, people will not give good ideas, they not leave the comfort zone. So that's especially for the energy transition that we are passing through. We need to innovate, and to innovate, we need to be open to failures. And I can tell you lots of failures that we did. But the good thing is that you look and you see, guys, we are amazing how we get to this point, thinking in another solution, and we got to this. So I mean, we need to be open, right? Open to failures, open to diversity is also important. Diversity is key here. Different opinions, different views, and failure.
So important to diversity of ideas. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'll throw it to Craig then to Hugh for the final word. Craig, failures. This is a mindset change.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of building on what Aurelio said there, you've got to create an environment where people feel as though that they can fail, and it's not seen as being a negative anymore. Yeah. So if I flip back to the example I gave earlier on about the Northumbrian Water Innovation Festival, we've been running it for a few years now. We've probably done somewhere in the region of 100 to 150 design sprints as part of that process. Right. So very intense periods of trying to solve a problem, trying to innovate. And if you look at the success rate, we're probably looking like 10% kind of success rate as what's taking it on to the next stage. And that's been a real journey from the first time we started doing that process, and people feeling like, well, should we put this out there because it might not work, to now gearing up where we're churning through these ideas, seeing what might work, seeing what might not work, and not seeing that as being a negative anymore. And it really it's a real cultural mindset to allow people that space and that feeling that they can throw something out there and fail and it not be seen as a negative.
Absolutely. And final word to Hugh. Look, that 10% is still a 10% success rate that wouldn't have been entertained if you hadn't gone down the journey. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the common ground here is to involve people in that decision-making process, the end users, the people who understand that process. And it's absolutely fatal if that is not a core part of it. We have for far too long technology that has been implemented to the end user and not with them. And that's really the absolute key success criteria, is to have a very cohesive and very inclusive design approach towards technology.
Yeah, I'm sure, Mark, you have your thoughts too, but we are out of time. That's all we have time for. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour. Thanks very much for your wonderful questions. Sorry we couldn't get to quite them all, but they were really good. If you do have a couple of minutes before you leave us today, we'd really appreciate it if you could just fill in that poll, which should be appearing on the discussion feed right now, to give us your feedback. We really value your opinion. So let us know what you thought of the discussion. Any thoughts, any extra things you think we could cover? Absolutely brilliant. We have lots more content coming your way, and to watch and get involved throughout the winter and spring. So if you've enjoyed this session, keep an eye out for more emails from us with more great discussions and insights too. For now, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Until then, all the best. Bye-bye.